The terrifying tale of the Everhart sisters, how I uncovered their cursed bordello of death. I never should have opened that door. The legends whispered around town always sent a chill down my spine. Stories of the Everhart sisters, their sinister fate, and the bordello that was said to be cursed. I was just a curious soul looking for a thrill, but what lay behind that door turned out to be far more terrifying than I could have imagined. It was a dreary afternoon, the clouds looming overhead, grey and oppressive. I remember shivering as I walked down that narrow alley, the cold air biting at my skin. You could almost hear the whispers of the past, a haunting echo of laughter now replaced by a chilling silence. I could almost see the shadows dancing in the corners, flickering like memories I couldn't reach. The old building stood there, its peeling paint and broken windows staring back at me. I felt a knot in my stomach. It was so dark inside, thick, suffocating darkness that wrapped around me like a wet blanket. I could barely see where I was stepping. Each creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. I could almost taste the dust in the air, a bitter reminder of neglect and despair. Then I heard it soft, almost imperceptible at first. A whisper. No, it was more like a soft moan, drifting through the air like a lost soul searching for comfort. My heart raced. I paused, frozen in fear, as something moved in the corner of my eye. A shadow? Just a trick of the light? Or was something there with me, something waiting? I brushed it off, but that eerie feeling grew. Every table, every chair seemed to have eyes, watching my every move. A cold draft swept through the room, sending shivers down my spine. I glanced down the dark hallway. I could see the outline of a door at the far end. It beckoned me. I wanted to turn back, but my feet wouldn't listen. I was drawn closer. Then crash. Something fell, a clatter echoing off the walls, making my heart skip a beat. I jumped, adrenaline surging through my veins. I rushed toward the sound, my breath quickening, my palms clammy with fear. Was I really alone, or was the presence of the sisters still lingering, protecting their secrets? As I reached the door, my hand hovered above the handle. I hesitated. A voice in my head screamed for me to leave, to escape before it was too late. But the thrill of the unknown consumed me. The tales of tragedy, the mystery of the bordello. Was I about to step into the heart of it? I took a deep breath, summoning all the courage I could muster. I twisted the handle. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door creaked open, revealing a void that seemed to swallow the light from the hallway. I stepped in, anchored by a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. The air grew heavier, thicker, with an almost palpable chill that enveloped me. My pulse thrummed in my ears as I registered my surroundings. An opulent parlor, untouched by time but tinged with decay. Velvet drapes hung like funeral shrouds, and the smell of dust and something far more putrid lingered in the air. Suddenly, a haunting melody drifted through the room, a ghostly piano piece that echoed from an unseen source. I scanned the dark corners, every shadow seeming to tremble with anticipation. The notes, though beautiful, felt sinister, twisting my stomach in knots. I moved cautiously deeper into the room, each footfall muffled on the threadbare carpet. The piano played a notes cascading like tears, full of sorrow and longing. I followed the sound, compelled by some invisible force. As I rounded the corner, the light from a candelabra flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. There, before me, stood a grand piano, its ornate carvings aged and chipped, but there was no one at the piano. My breath hitched as the last note faded into silence. An oppressive weight settled over me. This was where they had performed, where the sisters had sung their seductive lullabies to unsuspecting patrons. I could feel their desperation, the echo of their laughter trapped in the air. Nausea rose within me, and I stumbled back, the realization hitting me like a brick: this was not just a building. It was a trap, a vessel for their tormented souls. Then came a rustling from the darkened hall behind me. I turned sharply, heartbeat racing. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe, taking on unsettling shapes. Panic clawed at my throat as I peered into the darkness, yet to my horror, I could discern a figure looming within, delicate yet distorted, a woman in a tattered dress, her expression frozen between sorrow and fury. "Leave!" she hissed, but her voice was like a chorus of whispers, multiple tones overlapping until it became a cacophony of despair. "You do not belong here." I stumbled backward, colliding with the piano, my hands scrambling against its surface to hold myself up. The haunting melody erupted again, but this time discordant and chaotic, vibrating through the very room that ensnared me. My heart thundered as the spectre approached, her face shifting from a beautiful visage to one twisting in agony. The room grew colder, tangible terror clinging to my skin. "Find us!" she cried, and in that moment, all the warmth fled from the air. The candles flickered out, plunging the space into suffocating darkness. I fumbled for the door, my fingers grazing the cool metal handle, but it was gone, replaced by a blank wall, trapping me within this nightmare. "Help us or be consumed." The voice echoed around me, growing louder, more frantic. I felt trapped in a purgatory of their torment, each echo hammering against the cage of my mind. What had I awakened? What monstrous hunger was urging me to seek their salvation? As the room shook with a supernatural fury, the walls began to pulsate, breathing in rhythm with the cries of the sisters, an overwhelming sound, consuming all reason. I fell to my knees. The floor shifted beneath me, groaning as the very foundation seemed to yearn for release. And just when I thought the weight of despair would crush me, a blinding light cut through the darkness, illuminating a door that hadn't been there moments before. Without thinking, I scrambled toward the light, desperate for escape. But as I reached for the handle, the whispers erupted into a deafening wail, shattering the silence. Something cold and hard gripped my ankle, dragging me back into the depths of horror. In the chaos, I glimpsed a figure emerging from the ghostly darkness. But when I looked closer, it wasn't just one ghost, it was dozens, their faces twisted in a sorrowful rage as they swarmed toward me, torment unleashed, each one screaming for freedom. As the light dimmed, and just before I was consumed in the clutches of despair, a name floated through the air, chilling me to my very core: Everhart. Then, darkness fell once more, swallowing my scream. The darkness engulfed me, a living thing that clutched at my lungs, squeezing out any semblance of hope. My heart thrummed like a wild animal, desperate for escape, but the abyss seemed intent on keeping me prisoner. I felt myself being pulled under. My mind struggled against the tide of despair that threatened to drown me. As I gasped for breath, shards of light pierced the heavy veil around me, shapes flickering in the void. One by one, the faces of the Everhart sisters emerged amidst the swirling shadows, contorted with anguish. Their eyes, once vibrant and full of life, now glistened with the sheen of endless sorrow and bitter rage. "Help us!" they cried in unison, a sound that reverberated through my bones. The haunting melody returned, this time layered over a dissonance that rattled my very essence. I could see their lips moving, pressed tight against the fabric of their agony, yet the songs they sang were strangled whispers of betrayal and despair. Each syllable was a knife that cut deeper into my soul. Everhart. The name pulsed in my ears, a hypnotic chant that dragged me further into the depths of their curse. My surroundings shifted as I stood, or more accurately, remained rooted in place amidst the cacophony of their wails. The room morphing from the grand parlor into what appeared to be a hallway, a narrow corridor bound by flickering sconces casting feeble light upon walls covered in peeling wallpaper. Instead of comfort, the faint glow only deepened the shadows, revealing doors that loomed like guardians of untold horrors. Each door bore a nameplate, the shivering letters spelling out the tragic fates of the once beautiful sisters: Adeline, Lila, Clara, and finally, a door marked simply with a chilling reminder: the fifth sister. They beckoned to me, their ethereal forms glowing faintly in the darkness, but as I stepped closer, the wailing crescendoed, morphing into anguished cries for justice. I hesitated, my pulse quickening as a gust of icy air swept through the corridor, whispering secrets I feared to confront. "Find her!" they implored, the word "her" slithering through the air like smoke. Before I could react, a shrieking sound erupted from behind the last door, the sound of splintering wood and anguished shouting. The sisters retreated into the shadows, leaving me alone with the urgency of that cry. With trembling hands, I grasped the doorknob adorned with a tarnished keyhole and threw it open. What met my gaze was a nightmarish tableau, an extravagant room, its beauty tainted by the heavy stench of decay. Flowers in crystal vases wilted as if weeping for the souls that had once breathed life into them. Silken drapes hung limply, as if their very essence had been drained away. At the center of the room stood a mirror, its surface rippling, reflecting not just my terrified figure, but flashes of horrors long past. I could see the sisters, trapped in a loop of torment, their laughter transforming into blood-curdling screams as shadowy figures encircled them, feeding off their fears. "Help us!" they wailed again, the glass growing clearer, revealing a dark entity slithering through the doorway behind them, clad in the stories of despair woven into the fabric of darkness. Its form was amorphous, ever-shifting, a cruel mimicry of human shape. My heart lodged in my throat as the sisters' whispers turned frantic. "You must confront her, stop the cycle." Suddenly, a powerful jolt surged through the mirror, and the entity turned its attention toward me, dark eyes narrowing in recognition. A breathless chill invaded my thoughts as it spoke, its voice a haunting echo of the tortured screams I had heard before. "You seek answers, but the truth is lost, and now, so will you be dead." I stumbled back, the room spinning as the entity's hideous grin stretched across its face. The last vestiges of light seemed to drain from the room, plunging me once again into darkness. The whispers grew frantic, blending into an overwhelming roar of anguish. I felt my sanity slip away, torn by the knowledge that the madness was only beginning, and then came the darkness in a singular force that wrapped around my mind, fingers curling around the edges of my consciousness. Just as I felt myself on the verge of being lost in its depths, the entity snarled, "Find the fifth sister, free her, or forever be one of us." With that, the pounding in my ears subsided, and I was thrust violently back into the hallway, the echoes of insanity trailing behind me. But as I stood there, disoriented and terrified, a single door slammed shut at the end of the corridor, marked with a name I hadn't seen before, the fifth sister. Before I could even take a step toward it, the walls began to contort, a familiar chaos flooding the air, voices rising in despair. I was running out of time, and the presence of something sinister was already closing in, threatening to ensnare me in its web as endless whispers flooded my mind, and then I heard Ida's soft, almost tender voice, woven through the disarray, a call for help, soft yet deafening in its urgency. "Save me!" But the moment I took a step forward, the ground beneath me shifted, and the corridor began to fold in on itself. In that blinding instant, the voices peaked in a frenzy, and the entities whispered a name that struck me with a bone-deep terror, Everhart. Before I could react, the floor opened up beneath me, plunging me into an unending darkness where the cries of the sisters echoed against the walls of madness, and I screamed, knowing I was not alone. But what lay ahead was far more terrifying than anything I could comprehend. The void swallowed me, plunging into an abyss not merely of darkness but of palpable dread, a hungry chasm that seemed to breathe, drawing me deeper into its terrible embrace. My body fell but felt weightless, as if suspended in an ocean of despair. It was where the haunted echoes of the Everhart sisters pulsed, their sorrowful chants infesting my mind. "Free us!" the whispers implored, amalgamating into a chaotic symphony that threatened to splinter my sanity. I landed, finally, not on the ground but onto a cold, damp floor, slick with an unseen substance that covered the surface like a shroud over the grave. I pushed myself up, heart hammering, trembling as I took in my surroundings. That I was in a chamber, vast and dimly lit by sinister flickers of indigo flame that danced upon the walls. Shadows writhed, extending limbs that beckoned and promised unearthly revelation, but I knew better than to approach. The air grew thicker, tension wrapped around me like tendrils, coiling ever tighter. In the center of the room lay a large stone altar, darkened with old stains that could have been mistaken for centuries' worth of spilled ink or worse. Instinctively, I knew what had unfolded here. Whatever dark rituals the Everhart sisters had endured were relics of a time when despair became flesh, convincing the spirits of the dead to spill their secrets. I stepped hesitantly toward the altar, each footfall echoing unnervingly against the thick silence, until I caught sight of an ornate box, crafted from ebony wood and adorned with intricate carvings of twisted vines. Drawn to the box as if by an invisible thread, I reached out and hesitated, a part of me aware that to open it could unleash horrors unknown. But the voice I had heard a plea so rich with desperation spurred me onward. I lifted the lid slowly. It creaked with a sound that felt like despair itself unfurling in the air. Inside, nestled within velvet, lay a woman's locket, its surface shimmering with an iridescence that obscured its true nature. Before I could examine it closely, the atmosphere shifted, and shadows in the corners began to pulse and grow. From the darkened depths of the chamber, figures began to materialize, swirling like disturbed smoke. They coalesced into shapes reflecting the sisters' anguished faces, lips twisting in agony as familiar screams tore through the air, reverberating like tortured brass. "Help us!" They screamed again, and in that moment, reality warped as the gentle warmth of the locket transformed into an agonizing cold, a reminder of the bond we shared, the connection that tethered me to their fate. "Her name," the voice resonated again, closer than before. "Speak her name, speak it aloud, and she may hear you." Instinctively, I clutched the locket against my chest, the chill penetrating my very core. "What do you mean? Who is she?" "Clara, the fifth sister," they chanted in a frantic blend of sorrow and hope, pleading for liberation, a prayer that echoed through my bones. Just then, a low rumble shook the chamber, and I spun around to see shadows coalescing into something far more corporeal, a grotesque figure, more solid than I could comprehend, inhumanly tall and distending with unnatural angles. Its form hesitated, caught in the dim light, revealing a face distorted by a grin that cut through its featureless visage like a scar. "No. You will not break the cycle," it screeched, its throaty growl vibrating in the marrow of my bones. Cold dread clawed at my throat, choking my words as the entities cried in protest. "Clara is lost, and she must remain so." Suddenly, the walls began to weep black ichor, the liquid pooling around my feet, pulling me down as if the chamber itself had taken on sentience, rejecting my very existence. Desperate, I held the locket aloft, seeking out its potential magic. "Clara!" I cried, voice nearly swallowed by chaos. "Clara, I'm here. I will find you. I promise." The ground shuddered, and for a heartbeat, I felt a shift, a surge of warmth coursing through the air, and I glimpsed a flicker of light amidst the encroaching darkness. The figure howled, a twisted cry of rage. "Fool! She belongs to me." With a final, deafening shriek, the shadows lunged. In that moment, a blinding light erupted from the locket, erupting in a spiraling torrent, illuminating the roiling abyss with a brilliance that tore me free of the indifferent grasp of the darkness. Yet as the light flooded the chamber, the contours of the horror began to retreat, pulling back as the figure's howl dissolved into panicked whispers. And amidst this glow, I could see a figure, a girl with tangled hair and a face marred by sorrow. "Help me," she mouthed, reaching towards me, but just as I began to step into that enchanted glow, the chamber shrank, the light flickering as if caught in a storm. The ground shook once more until fissures split wide open, and shadows beneath me reached out like skeletal hands, threatening to pull me into a void far darker and more dangerous than the one I had just escaped. As I felt myself slipping, Clara's eyes locked onto mine with an inexplicable urgency, a lifeline forged through the horror. "Save me," her mouthing echoed one last time just before I was yanked back into the suffocating darkness, the shock of her presence haunting my every breath as her silhouette faded from view, and then, silence. The silence was thick, a suffocating shroud that clung to my skin like the damp chill emerging from the ground. The absence of sound felt uncanny, as if the very essence of chaos had recoiled, forgetting my existence. I remained on my knees, frozen in a bleak reality where time stood still, wrapped tightly in the tendrils of despair that lingered like smoke. But the quiet didn't last. From it emerged a low, thrumming hum, a resonance that tugged at the corners of my consciousness, compelling me to stand. Swallowing my fear, I pushed to my feet, the cold ichor now congealed around my ankles, leeching energy, weighing me down. I peered around, breath hitching as light began to fade completely, extinguished by the shadows creeping back like serpents reclaiming their territory. Suddenly, the candles, once flickering with that ghostly blue flame, sputtered back to life, bathing the chamber in a ghastly glow, illuminating grotesque murals lining the walls. The images twisted and writhed, scenes of ritualistic torment, figures robed in tattered garments, chanting over figures bound to the stone altar, depictions that mirrored the dread that had seeped into the marrow of my being. "Clara," I whispered, the very sound swallowed by the rising hum that now felt like a heartbeat, throbbing through the air, reverberating in my chest. The walls began to answer, pulsing in time with the sound, each thrum echoing like a distant scream. I stepped toward the altar, feeling compelled to investigate further despite the primal instinct to flee. The locket dangled from my neck, cool against my skin, whispering secrets I longed to unravel. As I approached, a gust of wind whirled around me, twisting the stale air into whispers that coalesced into disjointed phrases, a jumbled cacophony of despair. The ground beneath me whispered threats, each tremor beneath my feet accentuating my fear as the chamber itself discontented, eager to unleash the horrors sealed within. I caught sight of something at the altar's Aegean inscription, worn nearly to the point of oblivion, swathed in centuries of darkness. With trembling hands, I brushed away the grime, revealing the words, "Death binds us, life seals us, and only blood breaks the curse." A thrill of terror shot through me. The sisters had not just sought to end their pain but to bind their horrors to this Placido, the next unfortunate soul foolish enough to answer their call. Vegetations of mold began crawling along the edges of the chamber, and suddenly, ethereal whispers slithered closer, distinct yet muffled, each cold breath a desperate plea laden with sorrow. I turned sharply, and there, emerging from behind the altar, were distorted apparitions of the Everhart sisters, faces warped by torment, their eyes hollow and filled with an ancient, gnawing hunger. "Free us," they pleaded again, and I felt their unmistakable grief wash over me, mixing with the dread that enveloped the AIR.NO. I shouted, grasping the locket tightly, feeling its energy swirling in defiance against the shadows that arose again, born of unbearable memories and suffering. "I am not your scapegoat. I will not help you," but my defiance barely made a ripple. The chamber intensified its vibrations, shadows reaching out from beyond the altar, grasping at my legs and pulling me closer to the abyss. A new terror emerged, the cold specter of Clara, her face a mask of pain enhanced by the darkness surrounding her, her voice a haunting echo of despair. "Help me!" she cried, her form trembling. "You must find her. You have to." Before she could finish, the walls heaved, and a portal opened behind the altar, swirling with colors dark and ferocious, consuming all light. From it emerged a cacophony of wretched souls, tumbling forth like forgotten memories. They wound around the sisters, framing them in despairing faces that screamed ominous warnings that sliced through the atmosphere. I staggered, uncertainty gripping my heart. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Clara wasn't just lost, she was part of a cycle, a binding sacrifice trapped within that void, and she needed me. As if reading my thoughts, the sisters' faces twisted with anger, their mouths contorting into wide grins that belied the screams echoing from their throats. "You will join her!" they shrieked in unison, voices layered over each other like grotesque harmonies. With a final shriek of defiance, I clutched the locket and stumbled backward, feeling the shadows grasping toward me, their chills sinking into my flesh. And then I made a choice. "I will find you, Clara!" I yelled, breaking away from their grasp. As I turned to run, the fabric of reality cracked. The altar trembled and the floor erupted beneath me as an unimaginable figure emerged from the portal, all sharp angles, darkness, and teeth, and it locked eyes with Medhat's same wide, maleficent grin stretching across its desolate features. "Your scream will be my feast." It howled, and the ground gave way as the chamber howled back, swallowing the last vestiges of hope into an eternal night. And through the shadowy depths, Clara's face appeared once more, her anguished expression barely visible through the shifting chaos, and I heard her voice pierce the veil, "Find me before it's too late." With those last words echoing in my mind, I fell into the depths of the darkness, not knowing what awaited on the other side, as the very fabric of reality threatened to unravel into a world where new horrors lay in waiting, hidden in shadows of their own conjuring. Plunging into the darkness felt like descending through layers of ice, each flickering pulse of light behind me a distant memory I could no longer grasp. The void wrapped around me, an oppressive weight pressing against my throat and squeezing the last remnants of breath from my lungs. I heard Clara's voice again, not a whisper this time, but a reverberating cry that echoed endlessly, leading me through the blackness, "Find me. Before it's too late." The words guided me like a beacon, pushing through the suffocating dark, but with every step, tendrils of cold horror brushed against my skin, pulling at me, teasing me with unwanted memories. I could almost see their phantoms lurking, twisted reflections of the Everhart sisters steadily circling closer. Suddenly, the void erupted into a labyrinth, walls materializing from the shadows and swirling in ceaseless motion. The air thickened with the scent of decay, rancid, fetid, as if the very essence of death lingered within this prison. The sisters drifted past me, their forms flickering like faulty bulbs, their mouths agape in unending screams, echoing the lost souls around them. That I stumbled through the maze, panic clawing at the edges of my mind. It was a twisted alleyway of memories, old, writhing images that sought to ensnare me further. I caught glimpses of faces contorted by misery, eyes sunken and void, all sharing their tales of despair. I felt their stories leaching into my own, laying bare sins of desire and longing that I could hardly withstand, and there she was again. Clara's figure appeared at the corridor's end, shimmering with an otherworldly light, her face etched with a haze of uncertainty. "You must hurry," she cried, arms outstretched, and in that moment, the ground trembled violently beneath me. A guttural laugh surged through the void, rattling the very essence of my being, its source concealed in the dark. "She won't last much longer," the voice taunted, dripping with venomous delight. Shadows twisted, and a figure emerged, a grotesque assembly of gnarled limbs and glistening teeth, mismatched like grotesque marionette strings that swayed with sickening grace. As I sprinted toward Clara, the air howled, full of desperate pleas and mournful wails. "Join us, sister!" cried a chorus of voices, beckoning from the shadows. "Embrace the darkness, it is inevitable." Heart pounding, I pushed forward as shadows snared at my ankles, dragging me down into the depths of despair. With every inch I gained toward Clara, the figure loomed larger, its features becoming clearer, a twisted reflection of their faces, an amalgamation formed by their torment. The realization hit me like a knife: this creature thrived on anguish, feeding off the very remnants of the sisters I longed to save. "Clara!" I gasped as I surged closer, desperation clawing at my throat. "I'm coming," but before I could reach her, an explosion of shadows engulfed me, throwing me backward as the darkness surged forth like a tidal wave. I felt fingers grasping around my neck, nails like cold iron, squeezing tighter, cutting off my breath. I choked and fought, panic spiraling as the creature's laughter filled the air. "Sacrifice!" It boomed, and I felt myself being pulled toward it, my body now caught in its horrifying grip. The shadows clawed deeper into my skin, and I felt memories flooding in, snippets of the sisters' tragic lives surfacing in grotesque clarity: their desires, their sacrifices, their unending torment. No. I screamed, struggling against the immutable pull. "You won't take me," but the creature merely cackled in response, tightening its hold until I felt my body fracture under the weight of their pain. "You will join them," it howled, and as its grip threatened to crush me, my vision blurred, the world bleeding together into a swirling canvas of memories and nightmares. Suddenly, that familiar flicker of light sparked in the void. Clara's face reappeared, pure and radiant as the shadows writhed around her. "You have to break the cycle," she shrieked, her voice piercing through the air, releasing a sudden gust that pushed me back against the force pressing me down. In that moment, clarity pierced through. I understood what I had to do, the words etched on the altar creeping back into my mind. I focused on the locket resting against my chest, feeling its energy surge once more, pushing against the entity that demanded my surrender. With a defiant roar, I thrust my hands toward the dark figure, calling forth the remnants of my strength and all I wished to heal. "I will not be your victim," I screamed, and as the light radiating from the locket flared, the shadows recoiled violently, shrieking as my power pierced through their veil. But even as the darkness fell back, Clara's expression shifted from urgency to horror. "No. You don't understand," she cried, but the words were swallowed as the shadows unleashed their fury upon me. The world around me distorted, an overwhelming explosion of light and a final howl reverberated through my very soul, the anguished cries of the sisters mingling together to form a haunting symphony as I was thrust into a new realm, one I could barely comprehend, and then everything went silent. The light flickered and dimmed, and as consciousness slipped away, I was left with one last chilling thought: in trying to save Clara, had I chained myself to a far greater horror? The answer spun just out of reach, and as pressure mounted on my chest once more, slowly awakening again in a new twisted expanse, a solitary whisper broke through the silence. You shouldn't have come here. Somewhere in the darkness, the sisters, and the horrors they conjured lingered, awaiting my next move, plotting how to weave my story into their never-ending tapestry of pain. The air tasted stale and metallic as I came to, an uninvited shiver crawling down my spine. I lay on a cold stone floor, slick with something that felt disturbingly alive beneath my fingertips. Panic surged as I pushed myself up, forcing my eyes to adjust to the suffocating darkness. Shadows cascaded like heavy drapes around me, and there was an oppressive silence that felt thick enough to choke on Clara. I gasped, my voice echoing into the void, met only with the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. The weight of dread pressed ever deeper into my chest, reminding me of the horror I had just fled. I replayed the final moments of light bursting forth, of the laughter that had twisted into a premonition of despair. I shivered, feeling the presence of something lurking just beyond my sight. Searching desperately for any sign of Clara, I pulled myself to my feet. The ground was uneven beneath strange inclines leading into unseen depths. Focusing on an eerie glow emanating from somewhere ahead, I cautiously advanced through the darkness. As I reached my destination, I found a weathered door, its frame adorned with strange markings that writhed like living tendrils under the dim light. With a deep breath, I pushed the door, which creaked open, revealing an expansive chamber. The air was filled with whispers, fleeting voices that slithered in and out of comprehension. I stepped inside, the chill expanding around me, and shuddered as the door slammed shut behind me with a bone-rattling thud. The room was vast, filled with relics adorned in fragile glass and iron, showcasing scenes of sinister beauty and foreboding despair, paintings that depicted the sisters' dark desires, entwined with the agony of sacrifice. As I walked deeper within, the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a ghastly chorus. Disembodied laughter and sorrowful cries echoed, urging me to listen. Join us, a voice murmured, seductive and warm, like the embrace of a long-lost friend. You're almost one of us. The floor beneath me trembled, a warning that sent a shiver of terror through my veins. Nervously, I hesitated, feeling the weight of the room closing in on me. The paintings seemed to pulsate, their colors shifting to reveal writhing shapes that bore a striking resemblance to the figures of the Everhart sisters. Were they beckoning me? I stepped toward a grand piece portraying them in an endless dance, smiles painted over tears, joy entwined with misery, and it began to shift, morphing from a seemingly innocent gathering to a horrific tableau of betrayal. Suddenly, I froze, heart racing. A dreadful sound echoed, a heavy dragging, as if something with a monstrous weight was being pulled closer. The murmurs crescendoed into a fevered pitch, as I felt the shadows tighten around my form, and the flickering glow suddenly plunged into darkness. The stillness turned shattering, a cry cut through the air, visceral and raw. Release them. The voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once, trembling with anger and longing. My blood ran cold as the chamber quaked, and something unseen surged forth from the dark, endless and formless like corrupted smoke. Help us! Echoed the sisters' voices, overlapping in a haunting chant, their anguish shredding my sanity. They clung to me, their emptiness wrapping around my soul like a tightening noose. One will be chosen, the other will suffer, they wept, their faces emerging clearly from the shadows, contorted by sorrow. Stop! I screamed, stumbling backward into the open space, where the very air felt charged and alive. The chamber twisted, and the paintings warped, becoming more frenzied, more chaotic, as the very fabric of the atmosphere pulsed around me. The shadows bore down, swirling faster, and I caught glimpses of grotesque faces among the darkness, snarling and gnashing their teeth. Suddenly, a wave of compulsion washed over me. I felt it rising within, the painful longing to embrace their curse, to join their unholy dance instead of fighting it. I fought against the impulse, pushing the memories of betrayal and anguish away. Feeling light slip like sand through my fingers, and then, I saw Clara again, her face flickering like a candle flame, reaching out to me, her eyes filled with desperation. You have to fight it. Don't let them take you. she cried amidst the chaotic symphony of despair. My heart surged with a desperate flame, and I recoiled despite the allure of resignation, but the shadows shifted again, a claw-like hand emerging, freezing me in place with a single, horrible glare of countless eyes. "You cannot resist." They hissed in perfect unison, echoing my very fears back at me. "You belong with us now." I felt the darkness closing in, memories long buried clawing their way back to the surface, memories of Clara, of sacrifices we made, of the endless cycle of suffering. I was losing ground against the pull towards their insatiable desire for my pain. Just as I thought I might succumb, a shattering noise erupted. The chamber quivered under the force. The floor beneath me gave way, a fissure splitting like a yawning mouth, threatening to swallow me whole. "Clara!" I screamed as I felt myself teetering on the edge, the shadows surging, dancing with delight at the prospect of my fall, and then, just as I felt myself slipping into the abyss, the room erupted in a blaze of light, shattering the darkness. Clara's voice pierced through the chaos, "It's not just about choice, look for the key." And in that fleeting moment of clarity, I noticed a glint emerging from one of the paintings, a small, ornate key shimmering against the black backdrop, locked away within the chaos. But as I lunged for it, the walls trembled with a howl of anger, and the very shadows seemed to writhe in rage, hunting me as I reached for salvation, a sinister chorus surrounding me in a relentless assault. "Choose." They clamored. "Sacrifice demands an answer." Darkness surged around me, shadows swallowing my cries as I reached for the glimmering hope, a key I might never grasp, when the floor erupted beneath me and the world shattered into another realm of despair. My scream was swallowed by the chthonic abyss that claimed the chamber, and in that breathless void, I whispered, "What shall I sacrifice to save them?" But there was no answer, only a cacophony of laughter that echoed into the dark, leaving me suspended between agony and hope. The shadows seemed to breathe around me, their icy tendrils writhing like living serpents desperate for warmth. I blinked against the weight of darkness, clenching my fists as the echo of Clara's voice faded, leaving nothing but a crushing silence that enveloped me like a shroud. A cry formed in my throat, battling against the instinct to answer the shadows beckoning call, a twisted harmony interlaced with despair that resonated in my bones. With a surge of determination, I began to stumble through the chaos that surrounded me, my eyes darting from one strange artifact to the next. Each one pulsed with a disquieting force, every whisper rekindling memories too painful to bear. The key, Clara's word, echoed in my mind, the glint of hope mingled with the taste of bile. Where was it? Desperation clawed at my mind, pulling me deeper into the chamber. But with each step, the air thickened, as if wading through water, dragging me down to a place of no return. Voices slipped through the cracks of darkness, murmuring a litany of sins and promises all at once, a cacophony of temptation that beckoned from the depths of despair. "You will join us," they lured, "join the dance of the Everhart sisters." Instinctively, I pressed my palms against my ears, straining to block out their vile song. But the darkness sensed my struggle, and a shrill laughter erupted, a sound that rang with both joy and malice, exploding within the very core of the chamber. The walls pulsated, shimmering with malefic beauty, and the paintings transformed, overtaken by the cries of unforgetting souls. In the periphery of my consciousness, I heard frantic scratching, something alive, something real, and turned on my heel, dread gnawing at my insides. A figure writhed in the corner of the room, its shadow elongating across the floor toward me. I dared to approach, heart hammering against my ribs, expecting to see one of the sisters, their faces too familiar, their expressions twisted with sorrow. Instead, something primal, something grotesque emerged from the blackness, an amalgamation of human and beast. Its limbs contorted grotesquely, as if they were confined within a suit of skin much too small. Its eyes glowed fiery, endless pits that breathed despair into the atmosphere, pulling at the depths of my own sorrow. "You shouldn't be here," it rasped, voice a harsh whisper that echoed along the walls, leaving trails of dread that crawled upon my skin. "What are you?" I stammered, the answer clawing at my throat. It laughed, a sound sharp as glass that cut through the silence. "I am the keeper," it growled, jagged teeth glistening in the murky light. "I am the price you must pay for your sister's folly. And now you must choose." "Choose what?" My voice faltered, the word a thin thread dangling precariously. Choose which sister you wish to save, it jeered, gesturing to the shadows that writhed in an echo of despair behind me, revealing Clara's terrified face, held captive within unseen bonds, her silent scream echoing in my heart. But beside her swayed another figure, one that radiated a different kind of darkness, unnatural yet achingly familiar, Allegra. The name escaped my lips with the painful twist of regret, memories flooding in like a tide. Of our childhood, of the promises under forgotten stars, of the spiraling path of obsession and betrayal. The keeper's laughter echoed across the chamber, reverberating through each relic, awakening something vile that had been slumbering beneath the surface. A choice must be made, it hissed, leaning closer, the stench of decay wrapping around me like unfurling petals of death. The price of freedom is born of blood, of love, of sacrifice. Surrender one to save the other. That I felt as if the floor was dissolving beneath me, the air suffocating and thick, me will to resist withering under the pressure of the keeper's dark promises. I hesitated, limbs trembling, thoughts spiraling into a waking nightmare. Could I choose? Would saving one mean damning the other? Clara's desperate eyes burned into me. You have to fight it, she gasped, though her voice was almost drowned out by the keeper's throaty chuckle that reverberated through my skull. Sacrifice seals your fate, it rasped, the shadows lapping greedily at its heels. Choose now, or lose them both to the abyss everlasting. I felt my heart shot ere a cold realization creeping into my core, and all at once, it struck me that this was the very moment I had dreaded for years, the splintered culmination of choices made long before I bore the weight of their consequences. But was this the end, or merely the beginning of torment? I could sense everything beginning to unravel, the brilliance of danger and despair colliding around me as the chamber reverberated with the lurking energy of countless souls caught in a dance of misery. The keeper watched, waiting, as if savoring the moments slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. Just then, a shadow detached itself from the corner, a smaller shape moving forward with a kind of hesitant searchlight, anxious for purpose. My pulse quickened, hoping against hope. Could it be? My breath caught as the figure drew nearer, emerging from the tumult of darkness, eyes wide and trembling. A lost child, please, the child whimpered, help us. My heart shattered anew, but with that fracture came an unsettling truth. The clock was ticking, and I could not hesitate any longer. I will save you both, I shouted, my voice trembling with defiance, feeling the darkness recoil, but the keeper's laughter turned to a roar, filling the chamber with a storm of wrath. You cannot save them both, it thundered, and I could feel the ancient walls closing in, folding upon themselves in ravenous fury. A glimmer now danced in the corner of my eye, a vial that appeared among the artifacts, shimmering with something powerful. Hope, a single thread weaving through the chaos as I lunged for it. And choose. The keeper screamed, its voice a beastly roar as it lunged forward, shadows surging to claim their prize, and then darkness found me, a howl of anger howling through the space of existence, swallowing my screams as the world tipped into chaos. The last thing I saw was both sisters, equally terrified, faces blurred on the edge of doom, and the key lost forever. The air thickened with dread, coiling around me like a serpent, suffocating and relentless. As the keeper's laughter faded into rampaging silence, I felt the weight of eternity pressing against my chest, stealing the breath from my lungs. The darkness around me swirled, pooling like liquid shadow, and between the whispers of the long-lost souls, I could hear the faintest echoes of Clara and Allegra's panicked breaths fading like distant stars. That I stood there, heart pounding against the confines of my ribcage, feeling the enormity of my choices bear down on me. The shimmering veil flickered in my vision, a beacon of potential salvation, above a treacherous sea of despair. But each heartbeat screamed one question: could I truly save both sisters? In a moment of clarity, I reached for the vial, its cold glass pressing into my palm like a promise. Every fiber of my being screamed for action, for a plan, for a way to wrench Clara and Allegra from the clutches of darkness. But what did I truly understand about the forces I was dealing with? Before I could unfurl the magic contained within, an explosive cry pierced the silence, reverberating through the chamber like the crack of thunder. Shadows surged forth, coiling around me with malicious intent, binding my limbs in a vice-like grip. Fool! The keeper shrieked, its voice cutting through my resolve. You dare defy the ancient laws? I struggled against the shadows, feeling their tendrils scorch my skin, leaving trails of icy fire in their wake, burning me not with heat but with absolute fear. The keeper loomed before me, all jagged teeth and predatory eyes, a tempest of rage and hunger. Your spirit is strong, but not nearly strong enough. Suddenly, the chamber's ambience began to shift. Pulsating lights flooded the walls, illuminating grotesque murals depicting the rise and fall of those who had trespassed before me, lovers entwined in agony, sisters divided by malice, and every betrayal scribed in torment. Their eyes bore witness to my plight, pleading for an act that could undo their cursed fates. Desperation clawed at my insides. "Tell me what to do," I shouted, my voice hoarse, ringing against the anchored weight of darkness. "I will do anything. Just let Clara and Allegra." But before I could finish my plea, a chilling wind cut through the chamber, carrying with it the disturbed whispers of countless souls. The keeper's gaze narrowed, and the shadows around me writhed, slithering greedily as if they had been waiting for my surrender. "We have all made choices, mortal," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "Your sisters chose to dance in the dark, now you must pay the price." In that moment, memories unfurled within me like sharp blades. Clara's laughter echoing across windswept fields, Allegra's caustic quips during long summer nights punctuated by secrets whispered beneath the stars. Choices made out of love and envy, devotion turned to despair. The shadows around me began to take shape, shifting to mirror my memories, driven by pain and regret. An anguished cry punctured the silence. Clara's voice, raw and desperate. "You have to choose. Don't let my nightmares bind us." The keeper's delight twisted into a grotesque snarl, reveling in the chaos it had conjured. "You will regret your indecision," it sneered. "The abyss hungers for those who hesitate." With my heart racing and my fingers clutching the vial, I made my choice, but just then, a blinding flash illuminated the chamber, a burst of white-hot light crashing against the darkness. Shadows recoiled, hissing like angry vipers, and within that luminous burst, a third figure emerged, bathed in silver radiance, a pale woman draped in an ethereal shroud, her hair flowing like liquid mercury. She was a wraith of purest sorrow. "Let them go," she cried, her voice an otherworldly melody that pierced through the chaos. "This cycle must end. They have suffered enough." Before I could comprehend, she reached out a delicate Handan offering of hope and defiance. The keeper howled, rage threatening to tear the chamber apart. Shadows writhed, flinging themselves at the luminous figure, but she stood unwavering, absorbing their malice until she glowed brighter. "Now, mortal," she shouted through the discord, "take the vial, unleash its power. Only then can you find the choice for which your sisters yearn." Sweat beading on my brow, I hesitated, caught between two worlds, the all-consuming darkness held captive in the keeper's wrath and the blinding light heralded by the wraith. The sisters' fates hung in the balance, suspended in a vortex of agony and hope. That I gripped the vial tighter, feeling its power pulse beneath my fingers, and as the shadows surged toward me, I heard the keeper scream, "You cannot save them all. You will be consumed." With adrenaline surging through my veins, I broke free from the shadow's grasp. I would not be moved, not now. I had to choose. My heart thundered in defiance, drowning out the keeper's angry wails, and as I uncorked the vial, light exploded in a cascade of brilliant energy, illuminating every dark corner of the chamber. In that sacred instant, with rage and power entwining, everything shifted. But what I saw in the flash of brilliance was more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Clara and Allegra, not just lost sisters, but shadowed figures entwined with sins of their own, unrevealing horrors I had yet to face. And then the light engulfed me, leaving a shattering silence as I found myself alone in the void of that ancient chamber, the keeper's presence replaced by something darker, something deeper. Thrumming within the depths of my soul, the darkness whispered around me like a lover's caress, inviting me to discover the truth buried beneath the torment of my heart. And then I realized, the sister's choice would not be mine alone. The darkness cradled me, whispering secrets in a twisted lullaby as I floated in the void. The keeper was gone, leaving behind an unsettling tranquility that thrummed like a heartbeat, resonating in my chest. I trembled as clarity began to unfurl, a revelation that had danced in the fringes of my awareness. Each breath carried a weight heavier than the last, laden with choices that tethered me to the plight of the Everhart sisters. Suddenly, Clara's face materialized within the shadows, her expression a haunting tapestry of fear and longing. "Save us before it consumes you," she urged, but her words echoed with an urgency tempered by despair. "No, I won't sacrifice you." I cried out, but the proclamation felt hollow, a frail shield against the encroaching dread that loomed ever closer. I realized then that this journey, this unrelenting nightmare, was not merely about saving the sisters, it was an exploration of a darkness within myself, one I had never acknowledged. I raked a hand through my hair, panic clawing at my throat. Time was slipping, and the darkness encircled me, waiting for me to make my next move. "Your fears bind you like chains," a voice crooned, silky and sinister, echoing through the void. The shadows coalesced into the form of the keeper, but this time it was different, more insidious, more personal, woven with threads of my own insecurities. "You must choose. Clara or Allegra. One must remain to release the other." Its eyes bore into my soul, glistening with a predatory hunger. Heart racing, I grappled with reality. Clara's desperate eyes begged for salvation, while Allegra, distorted in the shadows, flickered between anguish and a strange sort of acceptance. "Don't let her die for me. I was never enough," a whimper escaped from Allegra, pained and vulnerable. The revelation struck hard. It wasn't merely the sisters' lives at stake, it was a foreboding reflection of my own failures. "Stop!" I shouted, the sound reverberating around me, escalating the chaos swirling in the darkness. "We are not bound by choice. This isn't how this story ends. The abyss relishes your lament." The keeper hissed, shadows thickening in response. I felt the dark laughter rising within its voice, each note a reminder that freedom came at a price. One must pay, one must fade, an enduring sacrifice must be accepted. Caught in this grim decision, I was overwhelmed by the weight of every memory, the laughter, the fights, the anguish, every shared moment with Clara, and the burden of unspoken words with Allegra. The realization tore through me like a knife. It wasn't only Clara's life I was grappling with, it was the burden of the family we had tried to forge and the mistakes that had chained us to this fate. "No!" I screamed, flinging my arms out as if to block their pain. "You both deserve to be free," but the keeper remained, shadows buzzing around me like a swarm of lost souls. It crackled with glee, dancing on my anguish. "Your indecision seals your fate. Choose." The pressure mounted as if the very walls of existence creaked with suppressed anticipation. My heart raced like a wild beast. Suddenly, I was transported to a moment from our past, the summer nights by the lake, laughter hanging in the air like a promise, Clara and Allegra side by side, light spilling through the trees as they smiled. They were whole back then, untouched by the darkness. "Together," I whispered, a mantra threading through my mind. "You are stronger together. Choose." The keeper snarled, the voices of the sisters weaving together into a wailing chorus, pulling at my heart with clawed desperation. "Sacrifice one, save the other." As panic swelled inside me, a blinding light erupted from the vial, illuminating the hovering shades, their faces twisted in anguish. I clutched the vial as if my life depended on it, and the pull of the shadows intensified, scratching against the delicate fabric of my soul. I could sense Clara and Allegra wrestling within themselves, their pain was coiling like a serpent, hungry to feed on my fear. "Break the cycle," Clara implored, her voice clear against the walls of despair. "You have the power. Use it." Breath hitching, I opened the vial and a flood of radiant energy spilled forth, clashing against the darkness. Time slowed, I could feel the weight of their torment pulling at me, tugging like an anchor. I focused, feeling the pulse of the light fill me with hope while the shadows shrieked in unearthly fury, shivering against the illumination. "I refuse to choose," I cried, the ground trembling beneath me. "Embrace your end," thundered the keeper as the shadows threatened to engulf me, but I stood strong, heart aflame with newfound resolve. "I choose all of us." With every ounce of strength I could muster, I propelled the radiant energy toward the sisters. Expectation merged with raw desperation, and suddenly, Clara and Allegra's cries harmonized in sheer longing, a crystallizing moment that merged our fates. The light surged in response to my plea, a cyclone of brilliance that tore through the darkness, shattering the keeper's grip. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the waves of light expanded, surrounding Clara and Allegra with warmth, a shield against the suffocating despair. They entwined their fingers, uniting in a dazzling embrace as laughter burst free, a sound of joyful chaos echoing against the dark. But even as the keeper's form began to disintegrate, its final, venomous laugh rattled through the chamber. You think this is the end? One sacrifice is not enough. The darkness endures, and just like that, the atmosphere shifted. Even as I watched the keeper dissolve into nothingness, the torch of suffering passed into a new shadow, a whisper echoing through the remnants of the tempest I had conjured. Clara looked at me, tears in her eyes. You freed us. But the cycle, it never ends. There will be a price, Allegra said softly, her gaze locking on mine with an unspoken understanding that flickered between us. We might have escaped, but it does not mean we're free. An unbearable weight settled atop my chest, the realization that fate could never truly be escaped. Not entirely. And suddenly, it struck me, it was not simply the sisters who were entwined with the curse, it was me as well. The air began to wane, a familiar darkness creeping back, slithering through the cracks in our triumph. No! I shouted, the scream mingling with a rising tide of despair. But as the shadows began to reclaim their hold, I understood then that not all choices come without consequence, and even the brightest light casts a shadow. The cycle would continue, forever spinning, perhaps revealing even darker revelations. I peered into the abyss, heart racing as the last glimmers of hope flickered. The wails of ancient souls returned, a relentless tantrum bound to haunt the seams of my mind, and as darkness wrapped its fingers around the sisters once more, I was left to confront a chilling truth echoing in the hollowed chambers of my heart. We thought we could free each other, but it seems we've only awakened something darker. The ground split beneath us, a yawning chasm pulling us toward the void, leaving me gasping with the knowledge, while I had sacrificed for love, love itself had never freed me. With a final piercing sound, something shifted within the shadows, stirring with insatiable hunger. My scream echoed in the bitter air, twisted and caught between an emerging truth I desperately wished to avoid. As I plummeted into the dark abyss, I could only utter one haunting thought, a terrifying realization that settled razor-like into my bones. In darkness, we are one, in shadows, we are forever trapped.